Buy me a $1,800 gaming laptop, Dad says. You can afford it, my sister's son said. I replied, dream on. Minutes later, she snapped, pay or don't show up at Christmas. That night, I reversed their tuition transfer at 8:17 a.m. They were begging me to answer, but without thinking twice, I knew I was walking into something the second I sat down, and Evan didn't say hi. No, how's work? No, thanks for dinner, just a long look, like I was supposed to know why he was annoyed. Then he picked at his mashed potatoes like they'd wronged him. Personally, I should have trusted my gut and left early, but I didn't because it was family, because I always show up, even when it's uncomfortable, even when they make me feel more like a sponsor than a sister or a daughter. So there we were, 5 of us crammed around Melanie's table. Me, my sister Melanie, her husband Rob, their son Evan, and our dad, Tom. Plates half full, Rob on his phone, Dad on his 3rd beer, and Melanie, pretending the green bean casserole wasn't straight out of a frozen bag. I wasn't even halfway through my glass of wine when Evan dropped it. I need a new laptop, a good one. Like gaming level. It's $1,800, Grandpa said. You can afford it. No, build up. Hey, would you mind? Statement. Like I was his personal tech fund. I looked up thinking maybe he was joking. He wasn't. He was already pulling up the specs on his phone like I'd asked for a presentation. IS, something liquid cooling RGB keyboard. Total overkill for a kid who up until 2 weeks ago thought Excel was a video game. I couldn't even respond right away. My mind was doing that thing it does when I get blindsided, spinning in 5 directions at once. What the hell, second, is this seriously happening in front of him? Everyone? Third, him to ask me for this? Then came the anger. They all knew I'd been setting aside money to help with Evan's tuition. Melanie and I talked about it last fall, after she broke down on the phone about not being able to afford even community college without loans. I told her I'd do what I could quietly. I never told anyone else. Not Dad, not Rob, not Evan. It wasn't about praise. It was just something I wanted to do. The plan was to send the $13,000 directly to the bursar's office when he registered. Apparently, helping with tuition wasn't enough anymore. I told Evan no. Short and final. He didn't even blink. Just shrugged and said, "Guess I'm not worth it." Then Melanie chimed in like she'd been waiting for her cue. "If you're not going to help, then don't bother showing up at Christmas." I swear the room didn't even go quiet. No one reacted, not even Rob. My dad just kept eating like it was the most normal thing in the world. I didn't speak. I just sat there, watching the people I'd bent over, backward for act, like I just refused to buy Evan a loaf of bread instead of a laptop that costs more than my entire end-of-self holiday budget. And in that moment, I realized they didn't see me as family. They saw me as a resource. I stayed, polite, finished my plate, complimented the pie. I even rinsed my dish and thanked Melanie on my way out. But the second I got in the car, I felt something shift. Not just irritation, something deeper. A clean break. That night, I sat on my couch in silence, Then I opened my laptop and logged into the account I'd created just for Evan's tuition. I didn't hesitate. I reversed the scheduled transfer, moved the money back into my main account. Done. No explanation, no message. At 8:17 next morning, Melanie started calling, then Evan, then Dad. Voicemails, texts, even a message from Rob, which was surprising considering I wasn't sure he even had my number. I didn't reply. Not because I was trying to be dramatic, because for the first time, I wanted to see what they'd do when I wasn't the one making everything okay. And I'll be honest, part of me wanted them to squirm. By noon the next day, Melanie had sent me 5 long texts, the kind that start out fake, sweet, and spiral fast. She was clearly pacing her kitchen, with the phone in her hand, typing like her thumbs were on fire. I didn't respond. Just read them one after the other and stared at the ceiling, wondering what version of me existed in her head. First, she tried the guilt angle, said she couldn't believe I'd stoop so low as to dangle tuition over a fanned teenager's head just because I was in a mood. Then, she moved on to justifying. It, said Evan, wasn't asking for a car or an apartment, just a tool for college, something essential. And then came the cheap shot. She wrote, "You're punishing Evan because he's the only one in this family with a future. Maybe that makes you uncomfortable." I reread that sentence 3 times. Not because it more confused me, because it was the most bitter, backhanded, arrogant thing she'd ever said to me. And the worst part was, she believed it. She honestly thought I said no out of jealousy, not because they'd ambushed me at dinner, not because I was sick of being treated like a checkbook, but because I couldn't stand to see Evan succeed. That was her logic. Melanie has always been that way. She could twist anything into a personal attack. When I got promoted, she said I was running from commitment. When I bought my house, she asked if I was trying to make her feel small. Apparently, setting a boundary made me bitter and childless, and threatened by my nephew's potential. I didn't reply, not even to defend myself. I had done enough defending in this family for one lifetime. That evening, my dad, Tom, called twice. I let it go to voicemail both times. Then he sent a text. "Can we talk? Just you and me. Come by tomorrow night if you're up for it." I almost deleted it, but I didn't. Maybe because I was curious, or maybe because despite everything, part of me still wanted someone in the family to understand. So, the next night I went. His place hasn't changed since Mom died. Same couch, same faded carpet, same yellowed photos of me and Melanie on the wall. He made instant coffee without asking and sat across from me at the kitchen table like we were 2 strangers waiting out a storm. He didn't talk for a while. Neither did I. Then he said, "You were right to cancel the money." I looked at him, trying to figure out if this was some kind of test, but he wasn't being sarcastic. Just tired. He told me he was the one who told Evan to ask me that. Melanie said I'd already agreed to cover tuition and that maybe if I had extra, I'd want to help with the laptop, too. He said he didn't realize how much I'd to stay, already done. That he thought I wouldn't mind. You've always been the one to help, Jess. You show up. It's just who you are. I sat there listening, heart pounding, because this wasn't how our conversations usually went. My dad's always been the stoic type. Head down, keep moving. If something bothered you, you got over it. Someone took advantage of you, you swallowed it. You didn't bring it up at the dinner table. So, hearing him say this now out loud, without prompting, it meant something. He kept talking, said, Melanie is furious, that she thinks I'm trying to sabotage Evan, that I'm jealous, that I don't understand what it means to sacrifice because I don't have kids. Then he paused. He's scared, he said, but fear doesn't give her the right to treat you like a bank. He looked me straight in the face and said, You've done more for Evan than his own parents. That's not a judgment. It's just a fact. Caught me off guard how much that meant coming from him. After years of being the one who kept quiet, kept calm, kept the peace, it was like someone had finally seen it. Before I left, he said, one more thing. You don't owe anyone anything, Jess. Not me, not Melanie, not Evan. If you want to help, that's your choice, not their right. I nodded and went home. For a second, I thought maybe things would finally settle down, but that hope didn't last long, because when I got back, Melanie had left me a voicemail, and in it, she said something that made it very clear she wasn't just angry. She was gearing up for war. Melanie's voicemail started calm. Fake, calm, the kind she uses when she wants to sound reasonable before tearing you apart. She said she was trying to salvage what's left of the situation, that she didn't want things to go further than they needed to. Then right at the end, she dropped it. If you don't fix this, I'll tell Evan everything, that the tuition was never coming, that you pulled the money just to spite him. I played it twice, not because I couldn't believe it, but because I could. That was Melanie. Control through chaos. Her specialty. But this was a new low, threatening to twist the story into something that would make Evan feel like I'd betrayed him, like I'd promised him in college and yanked it away out of pure cruelty. So, I called her not to beg, not to explain, just to say, tell him. She didn't expect that. There was this long pause. And then she started, sputtering, backpedaling. Said I was being unreasonable. Said I was escalating things. I didn't even listen to the rest. I just said one more thing before hanging up. Make sure you tell him why. Tell him how you embarrassed me in front of everyone, how you called me selfish for not buying him a luxury toy. Tell him what you said about Christmas, fatal, and I hung up. The next 2 days were quiet. No calls, no messages, nothing from anyone. Then, on the 3rd day, it started. Evan called me from his own number. I let it ring, then listened. I lit to the voicemail. He sounded confused. Said he talked to Melanie, that he didn't know what was going on but wanted to understand. That he thought I was just mad about dinner and didn't realize things had gotten so serious. Was clear Melanie hadn't told him everything. Just enough to make him feel like a victim. So I called him back, and for the first time, I told him the truth. I explained how I'd been planning to help with tuition long before he even applied, that the money was real, that it was sitting in an account for months. I told him I delayed a trip I'd been saving for, stopped contributing to my fans, retirement for a few months, and even picked up extra consulting work just to make it happen. I told him the only reason the money wasn't going through was because of what happened at that dinner, because of how he and his mom treated me. And he was quiet, not defensive, just quiet. Then he said something I didn't expect. I didn't know you did all that. Mom made it sound like it was just a small thing. I said it wasn't small to me. Then he apologized, genuinely said he never should have brought it up like that. Thing was dumb. That he didn't mean to pressure me, and I believed him. Told him something else, too. I said, this wasn't just about you, Evan. This was about years of your mom treating me like a spare wallet. Years of being good, enough to fund things, but not good, enough to be respected. He said he understood, that he hoped we could still talk, that maybe someday he'd earned to that help back. I told him, maybe. Then we hung up. Called again. I didn't pick up because she just lost the one thing she had left. Control over the story. And she wasn't going to take that well. I was halfway through a budget meeting when my phone buzzed. The receptionist said, your sister's here, he says. It's important. I almost laughed. Of course, she was. I hadn't seen Melanie in person since the dinner. She hadn't even texted after I spoke to Evan. She just disappeared into whatever storm she was brewing. And now, suddenly, she'd materialized at my job like this was some kind of emergency. I told the receptionist to send her up. I had 10 minutes before my next meeting. I wasn't expecting anything meaningful. Maybe a guilt trip. Maybe some fake crying. Most, a carefully scripted apology designed to rope me back into writing. Another check. She walked in quietly, didn't look me in the eye, and sat in the chair across from my desk like a kid, waiting for detention to start. She looked like hell. Tired, eyes puffy. She wasn't performing. At least not like usual. That alone made me uneasy. Before I could say anything, she pulled a thick, white envelope out of her purse and slid it across my desk. She didn't explain, just said, you were right. I raised an cynicism eyebrow, but didn't speak. I opened it, slowly. At first, I wasn't sure what I was looking at. There were transaction logs, screenshots from her banking app, emails from her financial advisor, even flagged notes in red ink. But then, the pattern became obvious. All of it was connected to one account, Evan's college fund. The one Grandma Mary started when he was born. The one Melanie promised me she hadn't touched. The one she said was safe, just not enough to cover everything. Which is why she needed my little of purses help. Truth was sitting right in front of me. $14,800, gone over 2 years. Spa visits, Amazon. Orders, name brand clothes, a custom, coffee machine, wine subscriptions, new, furniture, even a payment to a wedding planner. I didn't even know who was getting married. I looked up at her, stunned. She didn't cry, didn't speak, just stared at the floor like a scolded teenager. You drained it, I said. She nodded. How much is left? $311. You lied to me. You made me feel guilty. In front of everyone. You ambushed me. And the whole time the money was already gone. She nodded again. And then, to my surprise, she stood up and pulled out a SIAM. Second folder. Inside was every document tied to Evan's financial aid, his FAFSA, forms, his loan applications, everything. She placed it gently on top of the envelope and said something I never thought I'd hear from her. I need you to take this. I can't do it anymore. I stared at her completely still. This was Melanie. The same sister who once screamed at me in front of our dad because I wouldn't split a $600 dinner bill. The same woman who said I didn't understand what real sacrifice was. Now, here she was, quietly admitting she wasn't fit to manage her own son's future. This wasn't guilt. This was collapse. She didn't ask me to forgive her. She didn't ask if I would help. She just handed it all over like someone passing a torch they never wanted to hold. Then she left. No dramatic exit, no grand final word. She just turned around and walked out of my office, leaving me with 2 folders full of secrets and debt and broken promises. That night, I sat in my living room with everything laid out on the coffee table. It was all worse than I expected. Not just the money, the loans, the debt, the late notices. Evan had no idea how bad things were. He was going to walk into college thinking he was halfway covered, and instead, he'd be starting already, buried. I stared at the paperwork until the sun started to set. Then, I picked up my phone and called Evan. I told him we needed to meet face to face. No phone, calls, no messages through his mom. I said there were things he needed to know, all of it. And I told him something else. This isn't about punishing anyone anymore. It's about fixing what's broken, if that's even possible. He agreed to meet the next day, but I could tell by his voice he was already scared. He had every reason to be. We met at a rundown diner a few towns over, one of those places where the coffee is always burnt and the booths are duct taped, but no one cares. Evan picked the booth by the window, hoodie on, backpack shoved to the side, like he didn't even notice he was dragging it through syrup. He looked small. Not physically. He's tall now, lanky, still growing into himself. But the way he kept his eyes on the table, the way he barely acknowledged me, walking in, it was the same kid who used to cry when Melanie forgot to pick him up from soccer. I sat across from him and placed the folder on the table. He didn't touch it. I started talking, told him I wasn't here to make him feel worse. I just wanted him to know what was real, not what Melanie spun to make herself look better. I told him the fund Grandma Mary had started for him was almost completely gone. That Melanie had used it not for bills or medical expenses, but for things like wine, deliveries, gym memberships, home decor, luxury items, stuff that had nothing to do with his education. I showed him the printouts, not all of them. Just a few, enough to make the point without breaking him. He was quiet, so still. I wasn't sure he was breathing. Then he said, "Mom told me we were just waiting on some paperwork that the money was, they're just held up." I nodded. I believed that too until 3 days ago. He picked up the folder and flipped through a few pages. He didn't say anything. His mouth tightened. His hands shook. A math. Little. But he held it together. No tears, just disappointment, the kind that sinks deeper than anger ever could. Then he closed the folder and looked up. "What happens now?" I didn't have a good answer. I told him I was still trying to figure that out. He nodded, then stared out the window. There was a long pause before he spoke again. Then he said, something I didn't see coming. "I want to live with you." It hit like a punch to the chest. I blinked, unsure if I heard him right. He repeated it quieter this time. "I want to live with you until I graduate." I didn't respond right away. My mind was racing. It wasn't just about taking him in. It was everything that came with it. Legal issues, financial aid, difference, emotional fallout. Melanie, Rob. But he kept talking. He said he couldn't stand being in that house anymore. Said he didn't trust anything his mom said. That Rob was checked out completely, barely spoke to him, unless it was to complain. That every day felt like pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. He said, "I just want to be somewhere that feels honest, even if it's not perfect." I just nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. We sat for another half hour, talked about school, college. He asked if he'd still be able to go now that the money was gone. I told him I'd find a way to help, that we'd figure it out together. I wasn't making promises I couldn't keep, but I wasn't letting him sink either. When we walked out, he hugged me just for a second, but it felt different. Not performative, just real. He got in his car and drove off. I stayed behind in the lot, trying to process what just happened. Then, my phone buzzed. A text from Melanie. Only one sentence. "You're really going to take my son from me? After everything I've done?" I stared at it for a while, then I turned off my phone because for the first time in years, I was finally doing something not for her. The peace, but for the only person in Vale, this mess, who still had a chance to get out. Thought it was done. After Evan asked to live with me after Melanie's last text after everything was laid bare, I figured there was nothing left to say. Then Dad called. "Sunday, 4, my place. Everyone." That's all he said. He didn't ask if I was free. Ask if I was okay with it. He just told me. Like he'd already decided this was the only way it was going to end. I didn't want to go. Part of me wanted to ignore the whole thing and move on. But the other part, the part that still believed family could mean something, got in the car and drove over. Arrived, Melanie and Rob were already sitting on the couch. Rob was half slouched, arms crossed, avoiding eye contact. Like this was the last place he wanted to be. Hadn't slept, no makeup, hair pulled back. That tight, defensive posture I recognized too well, the one she used when she felt the walls closing in. Evan came in a few minutes later. He sat down next to me without saying anything. Tension. No awkwardness, just quiet understanding. Dad stood near the TV, holding a folder. His face was hard to read. Not angry, not emotional, just determined. He started talking immediately. He said he knew everything. Now. He'd seen the documents, the bank, statements, the transactions. All of it. He said there was no room left for excuses. He looked at Melanie. You emptied his college fund, lied about it, then tried to make Jessica the villain. When she wouldn't pick up the pieces you broke. That ends today. Melanie started to speak, opened her mouth like she was going to explain. Maybe spin it one more time. But Dad raised his hand and cut her off. Trips. You used your own son's future, like a credit card, then turned around and punished the one person who tried to help him. He turned to me. Jess has stepped up in ways none of us ever have, and now she's doing it again. Then looked at Evan. You're almost 18, but until then, you deserve a stable home, one that isn't built on lies and stress. Then finally, he looked back at me. Are you willing to take guardianship until he graduates? The room froze. Melanie stared at him like he'd betrayed her. Rob didn't move. Evan just looked straight ahead. And me. I said, yes, simple, final. No hesitation. That was when Melanie stood up. He didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't say a word. She just grabbed her purse and walked out of Dad's house like the ground had given way beneath her. I thought Rob would follow her. He just stood there for a second, then looked at me. Let me know if you need anything. I think I'm done with all this. And then he left too. No one chased them. After that, everything was still. Dad sat down and poured himself a drink. Evan leaned back in his chair. I exhaled. For what felt like the first time in a month. It was over. Not in a neat, clean way. Not in the way families in movies come back together, but in the only way it could have ended, with the truth in the open, and the people who couldn't face it finally walking out of their own free will. Later that night, Evan and I picked up Thai food on the way home. He helped carry the bags, and like it was already his place. No ceremony, no drama, just normal. For the first time, as we sat at the table, my phone buzzed. It was Melanie. 5 words. Take care of him, please. I stared at it for a long time. No anger, no sarcasm, no manipulation, just surrender. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. But deep down, I knew I would. Not for her, for him. Because Evan deserved better than the mess he came from. And maybe, just maybe, so did I. Update. The first few weeks after, everything blew up. Felt like a strange kind of calm. Evan was living with me. School was steady. And I was doing what I always did, making things work. Guardianship paperwork was moving forward. Emails with school staff were piling up. My kitchen was full of college brochures, FAFSA instructions, and printouts I didn't remember printing. I told myself this was what family was supposed to mean. that maybe, just maybe, all the years of being the dependable one, the fixer, were leading to something worthwhile. But that feeling didn't last. At first, it was little things. The way I'd wake up every morning with a stomach ache, already anxious about what the day might throw at me. The way I flinched every time my phone buzzed, waiting for another guilt, a trip from Melanie, or a long-winded voicemail from Dad trying to keep the peace. But the messages never came. That should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like being ghosted by people I'd spent my whole life trying to please. And the silence, it wasn't kind. It was cold. It was strategic. They weren't reaching out because they'd finally seen what they did wrong. They were punishing me with absence, hoping I'd miss them enough to crawl back and fix it. Didn't miss them. I missed the idea of them. The version of my family I used to. Hope would appear if I just tried hard enough. The truth was, I was tired. I was bone-deep tired. I wasn't just working a full-time job. I was parenting a teenager, running his college prep, managing legal documents, trying to keep the fridge stocked, the lights on, the noise in my head quiet enough to sleep at night. And for what? Sister who weaponized my kindness. A brother-in-law who never spoke unless it was to blame someone. A father who sat on the sidelines for 20 years. And a nephew who was never the problem, but who was the collateral damage of everything I should have walked away from a long time ago. The final push came one night when Evan asked if I could drive him to a school event. Nothing big, just a game. But I said no, not because I didn't care, because I was sitting in my car in the driveway, unable to convince myself to go back inside. I was sitting there, crying for no specific reason for the 5th night in a row. I realized I was drowning and no one was going to save me. I told Evan the truth. I told him I needed to stop, not just slow down, stop from the family, from the legal process, from carrying this weight that was never mine. In the first place, I told him I loved him, but I had to love myself too. He didn't argue. He didn't guilt me. He didn't even look surprised. He said, "I'll be okay. You've already done more for me than anyone else ever has." We made arrangements. He went to stay with a friend's family, people I trust, who stepped up without hesitation. School was notified. I paused the guardianship with the attorney. No drama, no scene. I packed up the college documents. I shut down the spreadsheets. I backed up the financial files and locked them in a drawer. Then I went through my phone. I muted my father. I blocked Melanie. I removed myself from every family group chat. I didn't do it to make a statement. I did it because I can't do this anymore. Spent years begging to be seen, only to be used. Not when I've spent thousands trying to help, only to be guilt when it wasn't enough. Not when I've sacrificed sleep, peace, time, and self-worth just to hold together a family that never once tried to hold me. Dramatic ending here. No reunion, no redemption arc. Just me, finally stepping back, finally letting go, finally realizing that I'm allowed to stop, choosing people who never chose me back. So, if you're reading this wondering what happened next, There's no twist, just silence.